When you think about the American Civil War, it's easy to picture it as just one long, brutal conflict, but that's not really how it worked. It was actually a series of, well, turning points, crucial moments where the fate of the nation really hung in the balance. We're going to look at the battles that didn't just move armies around, but actually changed the entire story of the war.
So, that's the big question, right? How can one single battle completely change the course of history? It's a wild thought. We tend to look back and think everything was inevitable. But the Civil War, man, it shows you that a few days, even a few hours of fighting, could literally decide the fate of a country. And that's exactly what we're diving into.
Okay, so here's a quick look at the big picture. The war kicks off in 61, and pretty quickly it comes this bloody stalemate in 62. But look here at 1863. That's the year. That's the turning point. After that, we get into what's called total war before it all ends in 1865. So let's start at the beginning with the shock of that first year.
All right, first up, the shock of war. You have to imagine, in the beginning, both sides were, well, they were full of this crazy optimism. They thought this whole thing would be over in a few weeks. A quick, glorious little war. Yeah, those illusions were about to get shattered. Big time.
So, where does it all start? Right here, Fort Sumter. It's a Union fort, but it's sitting right in the middle of Confederate territory. In April of 61, the cannons just, pow, opened up. For 34 hours, they just pounded the fort. And when the Union flag finally came down, that was it. The war was on.
Now, what's interesting about Fort Sumter is that it wasn't some huge, bloody battle. Not really. But what it represented, wow, it was the point of no return. This was the moment that drew a line in the sand. After this, there was no going back. Both sides were all in for a full-blown war.
Okay, so fast forward a few months, and we're at the first Battle of Bull Run. And get this, people from Washington, D.C. actually packed picnic baskets and came out to watch. Like it was a sporting event. They were expecting this grand, heroic show, and a quick Union win, of course. Well, they were about to get a serious reality check.
The shock was just huge. The Confederates won, and the Union Army, along with all those picnic-goers, went running back to Washington in an absolute panic. It was a wake-up call for the North, a really humiliating one. The big takeaway? This wasn't going to be some fun little spectacle. Nope. This was going to be a long, deadly, brutal war.
A year goes by, and the level of violence has just exploded. I mean, it's gotten horrific. This brings us to the Battle of Antietam. Here, the famous Confederate general, Robert E. Lee, decides to make a massive gamble. He's going to invade the North. He's looking for that one big knockout victory on Union soil to just end the war. Think about that quote for a second. The bloodiest single day in American history, not just of the war, in the entire history of the country. We're talking about more than 22,000 casualties in just 12 hours. The scale of the carnage it's just hard to even wrap your head around.
So even though the cost was staggering, this Union victory was a game changer for a few really big reasons. First, it stopped Lee's invasion cold. Huge. Second, it gave President Lincoln the political win he desperately needed to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. And this was a masterstroke, right? It totally changed what the war was about. Now it wasn't just about saving the Union, it was a fight to end slavery. And that, in turn, made it pretty much impossible for countries like Britain and France to even think about helping the Confederacy.
Okay, now we get to 1863. This is it. This is the pivot point of the entire war. Everything before was a build-up to this year, and everything after was a direct result of it. Two massive victories for the Union in the summer of 63 basically sealed the deal.
First up, you've probably heard of this one. The Battle of Gettysburg. It's legendary for a reason. This was Lee's second big swing at invading the North, and it was his most ambitious push yet. For 3 straight days in July, these two massive armies just hammered each other in what turned out to be the biggest battle of the entire war. For the Confederacy, Gettysburg was an absolute catastrophe. That last desperate charge, Pickett's charge, it was a complete disaster. Lee's army was just broken. They were forced to retreat, and they would never again be strong enough to launch an attack like that. This is why, when you ask people what the turning point of the Civil War was, a lot of them will say Gettysburg, period.
But here's the thing. While all that was happening at Gettysburg, something just as critical was going down hundreds of miles away.
Out west, the Union General Ulysses S. Grant was laying siege to Vicksburg. This was a Confederate fortress, a true citadel, sitting high up on a bluff overlooking the Mississippi River. The siege was long, it was grueling. But on July 4th, 1863, get this, the day after the win at Gettysburg, Vicksburg surrendered. This was a brilliant move by Grant, because with Vicksburg, the Union now controlled the entire Mississippi River. They had literally sliced the Confederacy in two, cutting off all those vital supplies from states like Texas and Louisiana.
So you see, you can't just look at these as two separate things. Gettysburg neutralized the threat in the east. Vicksburg secured a massive strategic win in the west. They happened at almost the exact same time. It was the perfect 1-2 punch, and honestly, the Confederacy never really recovered from it. The tide had officially irreversibly turned.
So, with the momentum completely on their side, the Union decided to change tactics. They adopted a new, much harsher strategy to just end this thing. And this final phase of the war, it was defined by one word: brutality. And the face of this new strategy was General William Tecumseh Sherman. In 1864, after he captures the city of Atlanta, he starts his now infamous March to the Sea. His army basically carved a 60-mile-wide path of pure destruction from Atlanta all the way to Savannah. What Sherman was doing is a perfect example of what we call total war. And the logic behind it, as brutal as it is pretty straightforward. You're not just fighting an army anymore. You're fighting their whole society. The goal is to wreck the enemy's ability to even make war. You destroy their railroads, their factories, their farms, and you crush the spirit of the people on the home front so they just give up. And it worked. The campaign was absolutely devastating. It completely destroyed the South's ability to keep its armies supplied. And it brought the reality of the war right to people's doorsteps. Think about it. It was psychological warfare. Soldiers out on the battlefield were hearing that their homes, their families, were right in the path of this destruction. Their morale just collapsed. The end of the war was finally in sight. So, after 4 incredibly long, bloody years, the end didn't come with some climactic, chaotic battle. Instead, it happened in a quiet little room, in a small town in Virginia. By April 1865, it was over. General Lee's army, which had once been so powerful, was now just surrounded, exhausted, and starving. Lee knew there was no point in fighting anymore. So he agreed to meet with General Grant in a small house in a village called Appomattox Courthouse to talk about surrender. And this was it. This was the moment. Lee surrendering to Grant. It was the official end of the American Civil War. And Grant, to his credit, was already thinking about how to heal the country. He offered generous terms. He let the Confederate soldiers keep their horses and just go home. The war was over. And now, the long, hard road of putting a broken country back together could finally begin.
So, from those first shots at Fort Sumter all the way to the surrender at Appomattox, these moments, these turning points, they did more than just decide a war. They literally forged a new nation in the fire. Which leaves us with one final thing to think about. How do the echoes of these battles, these turning points, still affect the America we all live in right now? In our politics, in our culture, how are we still feeling those reverberations today?